It's Pranav from Math Circle here. Right now I'm going to be showing you how to do good on the Math Kangaroo. My first strategy is called just guessing. But since there's 5 options, you have a 20% chance of getting it right, and there's 120 points possible. So that means you get 120 times 1/5, an average of 24 points. Now that's better than not doing anything. Now if you actually want to get a good score, let's try the second strategy, which is just focusing on getting the first 10 right. The first 10 problems are each worth 3 points, and since there's 10 of them, you get 30. These problems are usually pretty simple, and I'm sure all of you can solve them. They always have some tricks, but I'll explain that later. Now, if you do these problems alone, plus using the just guess strategy, you get 30 points plus 90 times 0.2, which is 48 points. That's already twice as just guessing. So, if you want to improve your score, just make sure to get the 30-point questions right. Now, those are the easiest and lowest risk strategies. If you want to go for more points, you got to go for more problems. The 4-point problems are a bit harder than the 3-point problems. But usually there are some that I know you can all do. For example, from the 2018 Math Kangaroo for grades 9 and 10, there was this problem. On an island, there are P penguins and D dingoes. If an animal eats 5 penguins, how many animals are left? I'm sure all of you can solve this because because penguins and dingoes are both animals. If 5 of them are gone, you get penguins plus dingoes minus 5. This problem is number 19. So the Math Kangaroo doesn't just order it by increasing difficulty or anything simple like that. So if you want to get a higher score, make sure to read all the problems because there's always a few random simple ones thrown in. Now, after reading through all the 4-point ones and going through them, recheck all the problems we've done that seem simple. Because some of them are simple and some of them have tricks with them that make them look simple. Also, make sure to be careful of things I like to be called time traps. These problems seem simple and are usually 4 or 5-point problems, but they take a long time because they require a huge multiplication or listing every possible case. Avoid these till the very end. Now, with that strategy, you should be getting about over 48. And with this, you don't touch the 5-point problems, and you're just seeking to improve your score. Now, if you actually want to go for the prize, which are pretty good, gotten a few, then you have to go for the 5-point problems, which are a bit harder, but they're always. I'm pretty sure you guys can do it if you do follow the rest of the tricks and have been here for a while. They're not as hard as our class works. So the 5-point problems usually involve a couple geometry, probability, algebra, number theory, or just logic problems. Now, out of these categories, personally, I like to avoid the geometry and the algebra till the very end because they are traps because the Math Kangaroo wants you to do things you're familiar with. While the probability and number theory problems have scarier names and you might be less familiar with, remember, everyone is too, so they make the Math Kangaroo makes them easier. Now, the logic problems are a big question mark because they just depend on what it is. By logic problems, I mean problems that don't really require math, but just logic. For the 5-point, if you're doing a 5-point strategy, just use a 4-point strategy, which is just read them all over, look at the easy ones, solve them, and if you have extra time, first review the 3-pointers because they're just meant to confuse you. And then, if you have time at the very end, then do the last problems which seem difficult. Now, if you want to go for 100%, there's one simple strategy. First, draw a kangaroo, better than this, and just hope and pray you get it. And remember to do all the problems. And now, let's look at some things that are specific to the Math Kangaroo that they do to trick you. 1, the Math Kangaroo wants to tell you what year it is. So they always have at least 10 problems with 2019. Now, when you see this number, you're usually afraid because it's like 2019 times, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 or some random big number. But then there's always a little trick to it where it just requires clevering factoring tricks, which I'll show you later, and you've probably learned by now, or just it looks confusing. This is especially true for the 3-point problems because they are just meant to confuse you. There's literally no other purpose than to confuse you using random big numbers. Now, another thing that the Math Kangaroo really likes to do is, for the 2019 problems, always remember that 2019, its prime factorization is 3 times 637. Yeah, that's probably right. And if you know that, you probably can solve one problem, because the factoring things require prime factorizations. And now, let's go on to another thing Math Kangaroo likes to do. They like to remind you that you're taking the Math Kangaroo. They do this by using the word kangaroo, or in such ordering problem, combination problems, and they just do that for fun. I don't want. And they also like to give you extremely easy problems like the one I showed you before, but it's like problem 19 or something, and it doesn't make sense. They either do this because they have a trick, or they're trying to make you doubt yourself and then put a stupid answer. That doesn't make sense. So don't do that. And then they also like using confusingly similar numbers. Like they like having problems that are like, what's bigger, 2 to the 22, or 2 to the 2 to 2, or 2 power 2 power 2. And then this is just meant to confuse you even more. Now, the Math Kangaroo also likes to give you a lot of logic problems, which is really nice if you don't know math. These are literally require nothing other than logic. For example, or just brute force. And now, let's go on to other tricks the Math Kangaroo uses. Now, I might notice something different. We're not using orange anymore because that's a terrible color and no one should ever use it, especially for writing on expos. First, let's remember that 2019 is 3 times 673. I'm saying this twice because it's important and it'll probably help you with one problem. So remember it. Now, on to more number theory because that's great. Just to remind you all of how to find the number and sum of factors. First, you got to prime factorize a number, which we'll call n, into 2 to the n1 times 3 to the n2 times 5 to the n3. And then to find the number of divisors, you just do n plus 1 times n1 plus 1 times n2 plus 1, and so on. This makes sense because for each number here, it can be 2 to the 0 and 2 to the n1. So you have n plus 1 combinations for each of these. So that's how that works. Now, for the sum, it's a bit harder to find, and so just use this, and find every possibility because Math Kangaroo is definitely not going to give you big enough numbers where you actually have to know it, the formula, and you don't have a calculator to solve it. Now, I'm sure you all know the divisibility test, but the important ones to remember are 3, which is sum of all digits is divisible by 3, it's 3. 9 is just do 3 twice. For 2, I'm pretty sure you all know that one. And for 4, just do divide by 2 twice. Now, that's pretty much all you need to know about number theory for the Math Kangaroo. So just for the last time, remember this. Now, we're using a different color again because green is also a terrible color and I can't write well. So let's go on to summing sequences. I'm pretty sure you all know the formula for 1 plus, a for the geometric series, which is a plus ar squared plus until whatever. And then the sum of that is r to the n plus 1 minus 1 over r minus 1 times a. Now, yeah, just remember that. It'll help you for sure. This thing is especially used in probability problems, especially in the 5-point problems, because there's infinite probability sometimes. You have to calculate and you use this. And speaking of infinite, when this is infinite, this thing simplifies to 1 over 1 minus r times a, but r has to be less, the absolute value of r has to be less than 1, because if r is greater than 1, then it'll just infinitely get bigger, so it won't have a sum. For a sum of arithmetic sequences, which are just the arithmetic sequence is a comma a plus d comma a plus 2d, and so on. For the sum of that, the average of the first and the last term, which we'll just call L, times the number of terms, so we'll call that n. Because if you can just take the average of the first and the last, which is the same as the average of the second to the second and last, and so on. So you can just sum those and divide by 2, and you have n of them, so that's why you have that. And then for the other thing you have to remember is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus until n is n times n plus 1 over 2. You could use this formula because n is the last one and 1 is the first one, and it makes sense. So that works out pretty well. Now we're going on to combinations. I know, it's a scary big word, so you shouldn't do them, right? Nope, because that's what the math theory wants you to think, and give you extra easy problems when you have these. Now all you need to do to solve them is know the simple formula, where n, choose k, is n factorial over k factorial over n minus k factorial. Now, if you haven't seen this before, this probably makes 0 sense to you. So let me explain it. N choose k is out of n objects, you want to choose k, and this thing shows how many ways to do it. Factorials are n times n minus 1 times n minus 2, all the way up to 1. So, yeah, that's pretty simple. And the nice thing about this formula is usually something cancels out because of their factorials being all like that. So remember to cancel things out first. And now let's go on to factoring. These factoring identities will help you a lot if you know them, because they are often used in those weird problems with big numbers. For example, if you see the problem 2019 squared minus 2018 squared, this is impossible to solve, and it's practically impossible to solve in the given time in Math Kangaroo if you try to brute force it. However, if you know the formula a squared minus b squared equals a minus b times a plus b, then you can just substitute that in, and you get 2019 minus 2018 times 2019 plus 2018. And then you can solve this pretty easily, as it becomes 1 times whatever that is, which is 4,037. So it's just 4,037. And that's a lot simpler than doing 2019 times 2019, unless you have a calculator, of course. Now, other identities that you should know, besides this, which is extremely helpful, is a cubed minus b cubed is a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. This is, gotta be honest, not going to be used as much, but you should still know it for some of the algebra problems. And the flip side of that is a cubed plus b cubed is equal to a minus b, a plus b times a squared minus AB plus B squared. Another useful thing to know is that xy is equal to x plus y squared minus x minus y whole squared all over 4. This is a pretty useful identity to memorize or just know, but it's pretty simple how that comes out. Now, if you really don't want to memorize formulas, you can use the binomial theorem, but they're not going to ask you something higher than x plus y squared. That's like going to be the highest, and if you're unlucky, it might be cubed. So don't bother knowing that. Or yet again, using a different color because we don't like colors at Math Circle. So we're using black, which is not a color. But now, geometry. These problems are usually pretty scary and have a really nice drawing. Like one of them I saw has this nice drawing of a table and a cat on it, and then another cat on it, and just finding the distance. Now you gotta pretend these are cats, and yeah, just pretend they are. So these look scary because they're so detailed, and they look like the real world, and you know, geometry doesn't see, math never seems to be useful in the real world. But actually, instead of drawing this table, if you draw a triangle and or something, then you can use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate whatever you need to calculate. And if you guys don't remember what that is, it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the hypotenuse, which is this thing, c. Or I just remember calling it the longer one of the two. This only works for right angles, and we're going to pretend this is a right triangle, and it's drawn perfectly. Now, other than that, some other special right triangles you need to know are the 30, 60, 90 one, which is, in my opinion, the most useful, and the hardest to remember, which is pretty convenient. The 30, 60, 90 triangle just is literally, this is 30 degrees, this is 90 degrees, and this is 60 degrees. Yeah. So the ratios are, this is A, if this is A, this is A rad 3, and this is 2A. If you don't believe me, use the Pythagorean theorem and you get A squared plus A rad 3 whole squared, and that's 4A squared, which is 2A whole squared. So it works out. This triangle is really useful because if you put a couple of them together, you get a hexagon. So see, I'm going to try drawing a hexagon, and it's probably not right. See, a hexagon is just a bunch of these things. Where each one of this triangle, this is 30, 60, 90. Now, if you notice, the other important triangle is also in the hexagon. And you guessed it, it's the equilateral one. The equilateral one is actually pretty nice. All sides are equal, and all the angles are equal. And just as a reminder, the sum of the angles has to be 180, which is why we know it's 60. Now, this thing also has a 30, 60, 90. So if you need to find the area of this, use this ratio. Let's go on to Pythagorean triples, which is really fun because it's more stuff for you guys to memorize. Now, the thing is, it's better memorizing it now than solving it there. The easiest ones are the 3, 4, 5, which is just 3, 4, 5. And then there's a 7, there's a 5, 12, 13, which is not as fun. And then it only gets worse with the 7, 24, 25. And then the 8, 15, 17, and so on. Realistically, you only really need these two. The others don't matter, so bye. So just memorize these two ones. And if these are just the sides of right angles, if you don't remember. And to find more Pythagorean triples, you can just multiply each of these by 2 to get 6, 8, 10. So that's why you'll need to memorize these, because when you do, you get a lot more. Now, let's do something else that the only other thing the Math Kangaroo requires you to know. Areas. area formula you really need to know, well actually two of them, is that the area of a triangle is 1/2 BH squared. We'll just draw a little triangle and there's an A in it. And then the area of a circle is pi r squared. Oh yeah, we should. If you wonder what B stands for, it's the base, and there's not supposed to be a square there. and the h is the height, which is just this thing. And for the circle, r is the radius, and pi is not the food, but rather a number which is 3.14. So on. Now, math kangaroo problems don't require you to know this, so it doesn't matter. But just because they'll just say do it in terms of pi. Now with those things you can find most of the areas, but I'll give you some of the weirder ones. The trapezoid is base 1 plus base 2 over 2 times the height, which is just two triangles. So yeah. And if you wonder what B1 and B2 were, if a trapezoid looks like this is B1, this is B2, and this is a height. So two triangles are like this. Those are the two triangles, I think. So now let's go on to another weird one. The triangle, but in a different way, with Heron's formula. If you're too lazy to take find the height, which is actually pretty hard in some cases, but you have all the side lengths, you can use this big formula. Well, yeah, that's not a 5, that's an S, guys. S times S minus A, okay, it's an S, not a 5, times S minus B, that kind of looks like a S, not a 5, and S minus C. If you're wondering where this random thing S is, yeah, it's pretty random. It literally just means semi-perimeter. So S is semi-perimeter, which, as it sounds, is a part of the perimeter. To be exactly, half perimeter. So 1/2 of P. If you guys don't remember what perimeter is, it's just the sum of all sides. So that's pretty simple. Except since you have square roots, it's bound to get messy. And if you have really big numbers, it's also going to be messy. So don't try this for really big, like 3-digit numbers, or else you're going to have a bad time. Now, you don't really need 3D geometry much, but just remember the sizes and the number of vertices, edges, and faces for the platonic solids, which doesn't really mean anything, so just look that thing up. And also, remember, this is my favorite strategy. It's the simplest one, and I know that everyone can do it right now. I've talked about this in the beginning. It's called Just Guess C. If you don't know a problem, just guess. They're not gonna find out if you got it right by guessing. And you also have a 20% chance of getting it right, and there's no penalty. So, who knows? You might get 100% just from guessing.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Now that's all you guys really need to know for the math kangaroo.
And
good luck on that, I guess.
Or comment below and we'll reply back. Maybe. And if you want to see practice things or anything about us, you can visit our website, which is basically the end of the email, but without the info and the end. So bye!